So, welcome to today's staatskantine event, for which over 65 civil servants and associated individuals are joining us. Thank you very much for your interest. We're very delighted to have you here today. Your host today is Staatslabor. We are committed to make the Swiss public sector bolder and more collaborative. We connect change makers and also offer consulting on innovation projects with the public sector, as well as training courses. Before we dive in, we would like to extend a warm thank you to Microsoft for supporting today's session. And we truly appreciate your commitment to responsible AI and innovation in the public sector in general. My name is Dimitria Interlici. I'm Head of Public Affairs and Business Development at Staatslabor. I have the pleasure of facilitating today's session, and I'm joined by many of my colleagues from Staatslabor, as well as some of our partners from Microsoft who are also joining us today. Before I hand over to Cyril Hollenstein from Microsoft, I have a few housekeeping notes to help us make the most of our time together today. So first, food and drinks. This is a lunchtime session called Staatskantine, so please feel free to enjoy your lunch while we talk. Then cameras, if possible, we would be very happy if you could keep your camera on. It's especially for Alexandra, it's much nicer to see your friendly faces instead of a screen full of black rectangles. And then third, Chatham House rules. You're welcome to share after the session what was said today, but not who said it. But the obvious exception to this is obviously all of Alexandra's remarks and what I'll be saying. And then lastly, we'll finish on time, latest at 1:15. And after that, we will stay a little longer in the call in case you have any follow-up questions. So Alexandra will start us off with a short presentation, and after that, we will open the floor for a Q&A. Don't hesitate to ask questions, to give your thought or to share your thoughts with us. This is your chance to ask questions and make the most of the conversation. So feel free to post your questions in the chat or simply use the raise hand button. But as I said, before we dive into today's input, I'm happy to hand over to Cyril Hollenstein from Microsoft for a short introduction from your side.
Thank you, Dimitria, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you also on behalf of Microsoft to this online Staatskantine. I'm Cyril Hollenstein. I'm part of the public sector team at Microsoft Switzerland. Running around here for a couple of years already, more than 10 years now in this area, supporting our local government customers here at Switzerland. As you might notice, the AI journey has been begun with ChatGPT out of nowhere, but Microsoft internally, we have been coping with this kind of technology for quite a while. With the good and the bad. So we had really early experiences on how AI can and cannot do fair stuff. That's why our responsible AI journey started already in the 17th or 2017 around, where we built out a responsible AI codex, which clearly also includes the topics that Alexandra will address afterwards. So it should be fair, it should be reliable, it should be also take care about security and privacy, but it should be also be transparent and accountable, and it should be inclusive. That's one of the points so these 6 points have been at the core since a couple of years, and we've built out a committee which takes care of all the AI processes and projects we are doing at Microsoft, making sure we really follow the path we are also talking here about. And the good thing is, it's not just for us internally. So if you are just currently in the path of discussing how AI will, and it will, in fact, affect your organization, how you should set up yourself from a process-wise standpoint, from an organizational-wise standpoint, we also open sourced a lot of this knowledge, which is available for you. So if you have interest on that one, just ping me on the chat. I can share a link afterwards. And as we tend to say, that the genie is out of the bottle, even we are just at the very beginning of our journey. If one looks back, the dynamic that has been in the market the last couple of months, It's not going to go slower, it's going to go faster. So even more, we need to be careful how we handle all that stuff jointly. It's a joint effort. That's why we also said we invest more in Switzerland. You probably have seen the recent announcements jointly on the stage with Federal Council in Parliament on infrastructure investments local in Switzerland to really make sure we have the environment to drive that innovation in a responsible way. And with that, I would say exciting times ahead, and looking forward for this session for Alexandra, and I wish you an interesting session with that one, and happy to hand over back to you, Dimitri.
Thank you very much, Cyril, for your introduction and your insights, as well as your perspective or Microsoft perspectives on today's topic. Now, before I finally introduce Alexandra, I'd love to hear briefly from you what brought you here today. So please share a sentence or a few words in our chat, what you're particularly interested in today's topic. Thanks a lot for sharing in advance. So, Alexandra, I have the pleasure of introducing you. Alexandra is an AI researcher, a tech entrepreneur, and the CEO of FemAI, a German-based organization. It's one of Europe's first brands for responsible AI. Through FemAI, Alexandra is shaping how AI can be developed and applied in ethical and inclusive ways. She was named Person or AI Person of the Year in 2024 and featured among 40 under 40. Furthermore, she was selected as one of 25 global experts advising on ethical use of AI. She has contributed to AI frameworks for more than 25 institutions, including the European Union, the German Federal Foreign Ministry, the German Federal Parliament, and the United Nations. In today's session, Alexandra will talk about how artificial intelligence can be used responsibly in the public sector to promote fairness, democratize access to knowledge, and support inclusive governance. She'll also argue why it's crucial for us that we shape AI with intention and courage. And with that, Alexandra, the Zoom is yours. Over to you, and have fun.
Welcome and hello everyone. Thank you so much for this introduction, for setting the scene for today's topic of governing AI and achieving fairness, access, and inclusion. And a big thank you to Microsoft also for sponsoring today's session and for putting an effort on how to govern AI with these important human-led principles in mind. I have been introduced already today. Thank you so much for this, Dimitria. But I'd also like to share a little bit about my background working at the German Parliament for the ICT Commission, especially on designing the AI strategy. So you can access the knowledge I'm sharing a little bit better. So I'm coming from a mainly German-led perspective on AI. Data protection is one of the key principles still leading the discussions in AI strategy, but was able to consult on a global level. So I aim to share a European-led, a German-based, but a global-focused perspective with you today. And my main goal for this session is to allow you, to provide you with information that you can ask the right questions. Because as it has been said before, right now it's about making bold but safe and also very nitty-gritty decisions, how AI should influence our governance structure, how it should lead the way, how it transforms. And for this, I recognized asking the right questions is key. And this is how I want to start this presentation, with asking a first question. How does AI change administrative action? And although we live in an age of change, there are just a few constant principles that can be applied in the AI age. There is one that you can rely on, and this principle is called use case specific context. Whenever we speak about AI, whenever we speak about biases, about trust, about where to use AI, where to not use AI, and to which extent, we should start with a use case specific viewpoint. It's the perspective that matters. And that's why I also started this conversation with sharing my perspective. So you have the opportunity to evaluate my knowledge and the information I'm sharing a bit better. So how does AI change administrative action? And I'd like to start with a use case specific and very negative example here. It's called PimEyes. Maybe some of you have heard about this online facial recognition software before. Have you? PimEyes is a facial recognition software that uses reverse image search to search for people on the internet and allow you to identify people. There is no specific use case, generally, if you are reading this. And the press says the following: it's quick, it's accurate, it's facial recognition on steroids. PimEyes is a search engine that's handy for reverse image searching and facial recognition. Vice. Let's look into the regulation. PimEyes is breaking laws in several sectors. It's non-compliant with the GDPR, and that's one of the main use cases, actually, when you look into how it's used nowadays, in terms of if the police uses facial recognition software to identify people, maybe in projects they could lead. I'm very vague here because I don't know, but this could be an assumption. Then they act as the controller. And under fundamental rights, the software PimEyes can be seen as a significant risk of discrimination. And what I'm showing here is the difference between how a software is perceived and advertised online. You can check the website of PimEyes and build your own picture. And what the law says about how dangerous this software is and how it might be actually used in practice. Now, in Europe, we have a new AI law. And later in this section, we will move the focus to how Switzerland may act upon that. Let's stay with the EU AI Act for a second. The EU AI Act is a comprehensive framework that is built on a risk-based approach with different articles regulating how and where to use AI. That's a very basic understanding. In this use case specific analysis in Article 5, we see that facial recognition is falling under Article 5, the prohibited AI practices. So it is forbidden, except of, and we're going very deep down this use case analysis now, except of the use of facial recognition software. Except of the use of facial recognition software in the public sector. And this is why I brought this example for today's conversation with you, to allow to open a room where we can really discuss the cases where governing AI with fairness, access, and inclusion becomes very important. There are some cases where we can wait a little, and there are some cases where it is actually relevant right now to make bold but people-centered decisions. So how does AI change administrative action actually the right question to ask? From our perspective, this question is a bit better. In what way does the integration of AI enhance administrative action? That's why we want to use AI for a benefit, while challenging principles of fairness, access, and inclusion. And how should the governance frameworks respond to it? In this question, we see that the focus of how does administrative work, how do administrative processes change in the AI age gets more concrete. It gets a little bit use case specific, because we're in this public sector here, and in use cases such as facial recognition software, there are different perspectives to take into account. And this leads to our first key message. Over this presentation, you will find 3 key messages that will help you to pose the right questions. And the first key message I'd like to share with you is about the power you have right now. It's about the responsibility we have, and you have in public organizations, to make AI decisions, to build AI strategies, hopefully responsible AI strategies that are very sensitive. And this means it needs a sensitive consideration with internal experts and external stakeholders. Today is a very good example of a public-private cross-dialogue, and I'm very glad to be part of this conversation and add a research-based and civil society-focused perspective to it. And this is section 2 of today's presentation that I like to share with you. After introducing the room of how sensitive decisions are, how much use case specific context is needed to make good decisions, to then focus on research results you can trust in. And what I'm sharing today is just one example of how governance decisions could be evaluated, but I've also chosen this one because I think I'm the right person to speak about it, as I published a paper in 2022 about the use of facial recognition software in law enforcement under the EU AI Act. So I feel confident sharing details about the risks of facial recognition software as just one area where AI needs to be governed very sensitively. Let's deep dive a bit into the research insights on facial recognition software as just one example of why it is important to focus on bias research, however, acknowledging it is difficult to navigate. Biases, so the accuracy rate amongst different human characteristics, is something from a public perspective that needs to be in the center of decision making. You are taking the role to govern for a diverse group of people how software makes decisions, like in visa processes. So speaking about how marginalized, underrepresented groups could be discriminated, and in technical terms, we would use the term bias, is very important. The bias differs from software to software, from field of application to the other one, from who actually uses it, how is it applied. It can be divided in 3 parts: people, context, and data. And that's a whole different session. It's a process. It's a project, actually, to deep dive into that. The aim of this slide is to show you a glimpse of what it means to focus on the research in the case of facial recognition software, which in this case is showcasing that we need to focus on especially 2 dimensions, which are very critical when it comes to applying the software in law enforcement structures, because it can build trust, right? There's a big reason why it can make sense to apply facial recognition software in public spaces, and it's allowed under the EU AI Act. But how do we ensure fairness and access? We look into the discriminatory risk of it, and in technical terms, this would be the accuracy rate. So how genau is the software amongst different people? And in this context, in this use case, we should check how it performs amongst different gender and skin colors. As we know that there might be a racial bias, there might be a data gap. So putting myself in the shoes of the public sector, in the use case of facial recognition software, I would definitely check the bias research on this section and see if and how the rates that I have analyzed in my paper in 2022, such as the gender audit in 2016, where we saw that 34% of women of color were misidentified, so false positive. They were accused to potentially executed a crime, although they weren't. And this is something that is very dangerous. And these rates have improved, but not sufficiently enough to allow a facial recognition software to be placed in the public sector without a specific analysis of this threat profile. This was a deep dive on the research we have executed, I have executed in this topic. And from now onwards, we will move up a little to a more general view on how to govern AI in the public sector, leaving with the second key message of today's conversation. Human-centeredness must be the guiding principle in decision-making in the public sector. Easy said, difficult executed. That's something I want you to keep in mind when it comes to how to govern with AI in the future. So was the question I was presenting before actually the right question? I don't think so. A very specific question I'd like to present with having this knowledge together with you is the following. In what way does the integration of AI enhances administrative action in Switzerland, while challenging principles of fairness, access, and inclusion? And how should the Swiss government respond to it? from a broader context, we now narrow down how this can be applied from a Swiss perspective. And I like to give you some nudges in this section of my conversation, some nudges about how responsible Switzerland currently actually is. Are you aware of your ranking against global competitors? If not, I'll advise you to check the Global Responsible AI Index. These are figures from 2024, so it's executed yearly, which is in AI terms not enough, but at least it gives the status of where we are. And something that I like to know is also where we want to go. Do we want to improve this position? Currently, Switzerland ranks amongst global competition on place number 15. I think that's neither bad nor extremely good. Germany ranks on place 2. But I think it is a great starting point to formulate a strategy. Where do we want to go? And then the question is, how do we get there? So coming back to the question game of this presentation, the last one I was asking was about the governance framework of the Swiss AI strategy and where you want to go. What is the goal actually that we aim for? And again, I would like to correct this question with all the knowledge we have gathered from this presentation. And I'm quite confident to say this is a good question. This is maybe the right question for today's conversation. The question is, how can AI integration in Swiss administrative action actively advance fairness, access, and inclusion? And what governance frameworks are needed to ensure these principles are not undermined in the process? This question combines the discriminatory nature that AI systems currently show in research without sufficient regulation and without clear bias testing. But it gives the direction. It makes clear in the very first half of the question that we want to integrate AI. We are aware that AI can be a win. And we want to integrate AI in a way that advances fairness, action, and inclusion. It helps us to govern in a way that focuses on the people and that focuses on the ones being overheard and overlooked most. This is the people-centeredness. And to slowly close this conversation, this input, I'd like to introduce the last key message that you may take home from today's presentation. In making AI strategy decisions, such as ranking on place 13 amongst the Global Responsible AI Index next year, just an example, you can strengthen Switzerland's strategic position in the public sector. How does Switzerland stay competitive? Can we use the EU AI Act and the example of the facial recognition software to govern AI better, more inclusive, with more access, fair? What is the strategic role? Which values do we focus on? And where do we want to go? So to summarize, you are in a position of power right now, and maybe you see in my face how excited I am to be part of this moment, because it's just a great milestone to make bold but fairness-focused decisions, which should always be human-centered. We speak a lot about technology. You will get a lot of data analysis, a lot of numbers about process improvement, about time spent, but please think about the people. And in introducing an AI strategy, in the way you govern AI from an administrative perspective, you can strengthen democracy. You can ensure trust. You can allow people to trust in AI, to trust in the government, to trust in democracy. This was my last slide. I hope you took something from today's presentation, and we will go into a Q&A right now. Thank you so much.